So, welcome to Brand Your Dream Show, the third season, and I'm so happy to present you Lori Robertson. She teaches people how to speak publicly, be confident, show up in the best level, and she's going to share with you a lot of amazing tips about how to speak confidently, how to choose your audience, and she will tell you everything about her amazing story towards a public speaker. Welcome, Lori. How are you feeling today? How are you doing? And tell us more about yourself.
Good morning. It's morning for me, afternoon for you. Wonderful
Yes.
to see you, Eve. Thank you for inviting me to join you on your show today. I'm so excited to talk to you and your audience.
I'm so excited as well because I know we've planned it for such a long time. I think several months or so. So it's yay,
Right.
finally we did it.
Yes,
So
yes.
let's move forward with this very important idea for public speakers, for entrepreneurs, for everybody. The visibility is a big elephant in a room for everybody. So what do you think about visibility for business, especially when people do public speaking, when people try to show up online with also public speaking on video and things like this? How do you think it can be or should be managed? How much it should be? How much people need to show up to get that connections, these touch points with the ideal clients?
Yeah. I grew up in the world of live events in terms of my adult career. I spent 10 years producing a big live event tour here in the US and a few Canadian cities. It was called Women of Faith, and it was a 2-day event. We went into NBA and NHL arenas, and at our peak, our average attendance was 14,000. And I produced those events for 10 years. And then the last half of my time there, I emceed the events as well. And I hired the speakers. And weekend after weekend, I would watch women and men walk on this stage and impact thousands of women through their stories, through the wisdom they had to share. And that impact didn't just limit to the room, it rippled out into those women's families and circles of friends and workplaces and far beyond what we could see. And so I know and have seen firsthand the power of public speaking, both to grow your business and grow in your career and to grow your impact from a mission level. I work specifically with women, mostly professional women, and almost everyone I work with, there's the practical side of wanting to get visibility for your business and for yourself in your career. But there's also typically a mission level because you have achieved what you've achieved because other people helped you. And you want to share what you've learned to help the people coming behind you. And so I believe that showing up as much as you want, as much as you can, in places and in ways that are authentic to you and your business is always a fabulous thing because the world has changed so much through video, through social media, that we don't have to wait to be picked. We can pick
Exactly.
ourselves, and we pick ourselves by showing up, sharing what we know in a generous and an authentic way, and it draws the right people to us. And truly, that's the best way I know to do it. And there's not a shortcut. It's just a matter of showing up day after day and knowing that your message will ripple out there and attract the people you want to work with to you.
I think you mentioned one very important aspect which I want to dive deeper. You said you just need to pick up yourself, which I
Uh-huh.
think is a huge, huge thing because many people, they're like, yeah, there is someone, they know how to show up. What
Mhm.
is about me? Who am I? Who will even listen to me? So tell us more about this, how people can and why they should pick up themselves and why their message is important.
Yeah. I've followed Seth Godin for a while. He's kind of a marketing guru, written, and has a really active blog. And there are a few things he's said over the years that have absolutely stuck right in my heart and stayed there. And one is this idea of picking yourself, not waiting to be chosen. We would all love for someone to call and say, it's your turn. We want to hear from you. I've got a stage for you. I've got an opportunity for you. But the fact is, for most of us, no one's going to call us. But the great news is we don't have to wait for that. We raise our hands and we speak up by showing up. And that's absolutely happened for me. 3 years ago, I started this business called Speak Her Coach, which is my coaching services for professional women who want to speak up, raise their visibility, and get more confident about sharing their message. And I remember when I was doing a little beta run of a course that I created called Signature Talk Workshop. And I wrote an email about offering this opportunity for the first time. And I sent that email to my own personal connections and I posted about it on social media. And it was the scariest thing to hit send and to hit post. And I think we all have this part of us that thinks people are going to say, who is she? What is she thinking? Why would anybody want to learn this from you? But the fact is, no one said that. And a handful of people raised their hand and said, oh my gosh, I'm in. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I was kind of stunned by that. And I think that we all have that part of us, that imposter syndrome part of us that thinks someone is going to say, who is she to do that? What is she thinking? First of all, likely no one will say that. Second of all, if someone does say that, guess what? They're not the people to work with you. Someone else is there to help them. But the people who are meant to work with you, who resonate with you and who you are and what you offer, they're thrilled to hear that you're offering the very thing they need. So it truly is a matter of picking yourself.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love this. Absolutely love this. So when we decide to pick ourselves up, the most interesting thing, it's like what I heard when I started. It was like, oh my God, everything can be right, but your message is probably wrong. So working like over 5 or 6 years with different coaches who told me that my message is potentially wrong, and if I will pay for their services like $2,000-3,000, and then they will fix my message. I paid a few times, I changed a few times on my own, but then I realized one very important thing, that your message is pretty much your story. It's all about you, and nobody will build it for you. There are certain techniques and methods how to polish this message, but pretty much when you are yourself, real self, not underprepared, no makeup, no dress up, nothing like that, but really honesty with yourself, when you stand for your values and things like that, that build the right message. So I want to hear your take on authenticity. And I know that you have some interesting story, how you become the public speaker. So please let us know about that.
Yeah. First of all, I could not agree with you more that to me, your message is something you get to by, I hate to say it, but trial and error. You show up as your best self and you test different things, you draw people to you, you see what resonates. And that's the only way I know to find it. It's not, if you'll pay me $5,000, I'll tell you your message. That's never going to work. How would you possibly know my message? Because you're right that I always say your story is your authority. Mm-hmm. The one best thing I have to offer, and the one best thing you have to offer that no one else in the world can offer, is your expertise filtered through you, through your experience, through your stories, through your perspective. And so absolutely, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, that it is not, your message is not something you find and pay someone to send it to you in an email. It is something you discover through the process of showing up. Mm-hmm. And so my number one best public speaking tip really is to be yourself, because nothing else resonates in the way you want it to, and nothing else draws the right people to you. And so I told you I produced this tour called Women of Faith, and about halfway through my time there, I was asked to consider emceeing the events. And it was a huge opportunity and I was so excited, but I knew I had really nothing to bring to the table and honestly was stunned. Like, what on earth were they thinking to offer that to me? And I'd had nothing but a bad, awkward public speaking class in college, but I worked directly with our company president, and she was the only person I'd ever seen MC the events, and she was masterful at it. She was just naturally charming and witty, and it always looked like she thought of the perfect thing to say as she walked up the steps. Mm-hmm. She made it look effortless. And but because of my job, I had the opportunity to work closely with Mary. So I'd sat and watched her work her magic so much. And I also had access to the footage. So I did something that made sense to me at the time. And I watched hours of Mary footage, and I made myself a little Mary script. And I went out and bought a Mary-like suit. And the first weekend with 6,000 women in the room in Calgary, I walked up those steps and I got my Mary Graham on. And I emceed the event, and it was fine. It was fine. It wasn't awful. It wasn't amazing. I survived and it was fine. But every weekend we asked the audience to fill out an evaluation, a comment card, and we sent those off to a data entry company. And by the middle of the next week, we would get that info back. And I always cared about the evaluations because I booked the speakers and I created the program. But of course, this week I cared more because I wanted to know what on earth they thought about this substitute MC. And I filtered through, and there was nothing about the MC until I got to the last page on this Excel sheet. And almost at the bottom, one sweet woman said, "The Mary Graham clone creeps me out." And I thought, well, isn't it the truth? Because it was weird. And I was weird. I didn't mean to be weird. But that's what happens when you try to be someone other than yourself. It's like wearing a suit that doesn't quite fit you. You can feel it and other people can see it. And so I resolved at that point to have fun with it, to give my best and let it be whatever it could be, and to be myself. Because when you show up as your authentic self, you give other people permission to be who they are. And that's what we respond to. And it wasn't like I flipped a switch and I was the Mary Graham clone and then I was Lori Robertson all the way. It was a process, but it was a process I was committed to. And by showing up, you are able more and more to let go of the stuff, the fear, the lack of confidence that kind of puts this veil of weird over us, and just show up more and more as who you are. And just trust that the people you're meant for your message will land with them, and that everyone else will just feel encouraged and loved on along the way. And that's what I try to do.
See, I absolutely love the story. I mean, you could see I was genuinely laughing about the creepy kind of story. It's fantastic, really. What I want you to ask, however, is like very, very practical aspects of that, because giving you an example, in my first interviews, and this show is quite old, despite people just now start noticing it because I'm way more consistent than I ever was before.
Sure.
This show is like 5-6 years old. So that's why it is third season. But the thing is, in my first interviews, when I started, I looked at my footage and I was like, that was creeping out everybody, me specifically. And like, one thing is to be on the stage and never see that footage ever again. And other thing, like, it's consistently moving on. So I learned a lot from my own mistakes. But on the other hand, I know that for public speaking, we really need 3 things. That's from my perspective, maybe more. Thing number 1 is a good mood. And I will ask you 3 questions and I will ask you to answer all of them at once and maybe add a few more ideas regarding the very technical aspects. So good mood, how you get good mood if you fought with someone, if you were depressed, if you are in your day of the month, if you are really angry with a political situation and now you have to go on a stage and clone someone. Or maybe not. You know how to be yourself in that case, and happy you. Now, and still authentic, right? Now, another thing, the voice. I know that there is a huge problem, especially on the first videos or public speaking way more. I experienced that when I was presenting my business in Chamber of Commerce. When I was talking, first of all, my temperature is rising. I start salivating like crazy. And then my hands start shaking, and that exactly in this like sequence. So, once I start salivating, I have to hide my hands. So we really need to understand how anxiety works, how you deal with that. And another thing, the postures, how we act more confidently by using our position on a stage. So how to present the way can actually posture activate more confidence in you, or it's otherwise? Tell us more about this very technical things.
Yes, no, those are great questions. And I love that you are asking those, because those were exactly the issues I had to, once I decided I was not going to be the Mary Graham clone, but I did want to do this job and I wanted to speak in front of thousands. I had to work through the physical skill set of managing the fear we all have to some degree, then the mindset, and then how to lean in and intentionally cultivate confidence. And really what you're asking about sort of touches on each of those three areas that I learned. And so let me tell you well, first of all, the reason we all experience some degree of physical symptoms when we step up to speak in front of the audience is it really goes back to our biological wiring and the idea that thousands of years ago, our ancestors had to hunt and live and cooperate in a group to survive. And when you stood up and you spoke in front of other people, you risked being thrown out of the group. And if you got thrown out of the group back then, it meant one thing, and that was not going to be a good thing, because you could not survive on your own. And so even though like we're not going to get eaten by a lion and we're not going to get kicked out to freeze to death, we still have that same wiring when our body senses a threat or senses us doing something risky, like speaking up in front of other people. We get that same fight or flight response. And that response is responsible for all of those physical symptoms, whether you have trouble with your thoughts, whether your mouth fills with saliva or your mouth goes completely dry. You feel sick to your stomach, your hands start shaking, you start sweating. I would sweat so badly, my feet would sweat, and I had to wear shoes I could slip off and dry my feet on the carpet before I went on the stage. And my hands would shake, and sometimes my legs would shake, because your body is preparing you to fight or to flee. So all of this blood leaves your head and your stomach and goes to your extremities. And I found a few things that really were almost magical to help diffuse that. First of all, and I know it sounds cliche, but it's cliche because it really works, which is taking a few calm, deep breaths. Because the fact is, if you're about to be eaten by a lion, you are not breathing calmly. You are not breathing deeply. So when you breathe deeply and calmly, it tells your body it's fine. Like, I'm not in danger here, or I wouldn't be breathing this way. The other thing it does is it allows your blood and to carry the oxygen back from your extremities to your head and your insides where you need it. And so taking a few deep breaths, that was part of it. Another thing too, when we're having that fear response, a lot of times we're thinking about ourselves. What will they think of me? What if I make a fool of myself? What if I say something wrong? We're not thinking about what we should be thinking about, which is the audience and how we want to help them, how we're there to serve them. And a coach a long time ago told me a surefire way to get out of our own heads and back into the heart we have to serve. And it is to like tuck in your stomach and tuck up your bottom, like sort of clench your insides. And you literally can't clench your insides and tell me what you're worried about. Like it takes your focus away from your head and all this churning back to your insides. The other thing that I've found really works is clench your legs and like your bottom, like clenching those big muscle groups, flood all of that adrenaline that's ready to fight or flee, flood it out of those muscles and back into your insides. So super practical, easy. Take deep breaths, clench your tummy, pull up your bottom, clench your legs, and it just floods everything back where it belongs.
You know what is interesting? This is actually called Uddiyana Bandha in in yogi thing. So you actually put everything in and like you release the air. That's an interesting thing. This is yogi's practice.
Yes. And they practice it because it works. And I've stood next to stages sweating and shaking and used each of those tactics and absolutely felt my body settle down.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's
also, by the way, they're putting focus in the stomach. It is one of the practices in martial arts as well. When we're trying to set the foundation, we also put our attention to the lower triangle, so to say.
Yes.
So even this one, it's like the most ancient way to basically deal with your own anxiety. Interesting.
And get out of your head.
Exactly.
And into like the core of your being, the part of you that's showing up to serve by speaking. And you also mentioned, so that leads us into energy, which you mentioned. And to me, you have to be energetic and passionate about your topic if you expect your audience to be. And I heard someone say speakers are thermostats, not thermometers. You set the temperature of the room. You don't reflect the temperature of the room. And even if you're having a bad day, even if your energy is low, you have to jazz yourself up. You have to hop up and down a few times. You have to listen to the music that hypes you up. You have to give yourself a good pep talk because you're the leader. It's your responsibility. You have the privilege of other people's time and attention, and the corresponding responsibility of that is that you have to lead them. You have to step up and lead them, whether you feel like it or not. And we have all experienced seeing a speaker who was dull and boring. And even if someone is talking about a topic you are absolutely passionate and interested in, if they approach it with a lack of energy and a lack of enthusiasm, you find yourself kind of fading as well. Where if you have the opportunity to hear somebody who's super excited about a topic you've never cared about or thought about, that speaker is still a dozen times more engaging because of their passion and enthusiasm. And even if you're presenting, some people present information that's not their own. Maybe you're a trainer or you are hired to present for another company. You have to find a reason to be passionate about it because that passion will convey. The other thing I've found and I've used to encourage myself is that your heart conveys. So you're not always going to get it all right. You're going to miss a point. You're going to stumble over words. You're going to skip something entirely, but your audience hears your heart. And I believe that fills the gaps where if you really care about your topic, you really care about your audience, they get that, they feel that, versus someone who maybe has absolutely perfect delivery, but doesn't have the heart. It's almost like watching a monologue or something. It's a great performance, but does it touch you on a heart level? Does it move you to think or do or feel something different? Not in the way it could.
We were speaking with Mel, she's comedian, and she was giving very interesting input on that as well, because what she was giving, she said, like, you have a contract with your audience. So you come here to deliver, but they also fulfill their kind of part of the contract when they listen to you and they react to your message. So it's like, double kind of direction situation. On the other hand, she was also talking about this idea that when we deliver our message, as you say, they really create this kind of impact, like the feeling in the audience. They guide, they connect, they lead. So it's like really resonate with all the public speaking ideas and comedy, how we make people feel, because after all, they will get back to your speaking, you know, right? If you make them feel right, if you make them feel good. And if somebody just clicking the slides and just boring and one by one, blah, blah, blah. She also said wonderful thing. She said, like, you know, if everything is written on your slides, then why people even come to you? You can email the slides to them.
Email them the PowerPoint.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would rather speak without PowerPoint or hear a speaker without PowerPoint. And I encourage all speakers to be prepared to deliver a fully fleshed out message if you show up and the tech doesn't work. If you had to deliver without your slides entirely, could you deliver it? Could you deliver it in a way that is effective? If your slides are your crutch for delivering, it's a problem. If your slides are all the audience needs, even without you, it's a problem.
How you memorize it, on the other hand, because the questions which I have from people in my visibility course for video, that's like the question number 2. The first one, where to buy the light. So the second one is basically, and how many, you know, the second one is always like, okay, should I use teleprompter? So, and I'm like, no, never ever use teleprompter, because everybody can see that you're doing this kind of thing, and it doesn't make any sense. And when you are natural, it makes way more sense. People feel the energy, people feel how it all works. So on the other hand, when I deliver videos or trainings, which are like 1 hour long or something like that, I have some sort of bullet points and some ideas, but I know my subject very well. I've been 20 years in branding. So, I mean, wake me up in the middle of the night, ask me about target audience. I'll tell you, like, you know, where to put the markers in your marketing campaign and how to do programmatic. You know, this is how. So, I mean, that's a different story for many people who probably just shifted into a different industry. So let's say they're in there like for a couple of years. So they are not yet breathing, feeling, drinking this kind of topic. So they need to have a little bit more preparation. So what do you do to memorize these messages?
For me, and really for the clients I've worked with, the best system is, first of all, the only thing I would ever memorize or encourage anyone to memorize is the first thing you're going to say and the last thing you're going to say. If you've got some statistics or a quote or something like that you have to get exactly right, then obviously you're going to want to know that specifically. But otherwise, it's just where you start and where you end. And I always have the outline in my mind. So I know what those bullet points are. And I've thought through how I'm going to get from one point to the other, the transitions, but otherwise it is not helpful to try to memorize. It's too weighty. And if you do get it just right, it's going to come across robotic. Like we can, in the United States, when I grew up in school, we learned the pledge to the flag, and anyone can recite it, but it doesn't mean anything to you. And even when you ask someone, what does it mean? You have to kind of think, okay, what does it say? Okay, now how does that mean? It's just memorized. It's just data. It's just words you've learned to put in a certain order. Where when you are delivering a message, you are not shooting for perfection. Perfection is not relatable. Perfection doesn't engage the audience in an authentic way. You are working for connection and authenticity, and genuine emotion and a heart connection builds that bridge. And when you try to get all the words exactly right, you're back in your own head. You are not speaking from your heart that touches your audience's heart.
Oh, that's powerful. That's so powerful. Speaking from and interestingly, it also touches a very interesting vocal exercise, which I just remember because I was teaching my friends how to think. And I was thinking like when I was very, very young, so a long time ago. So, you know, the way how we use our vocal cords and we think from the stomach.
Mhm.
instead of doing it through the throat.
Mhm.
Same thing, I
Mhm.
think, very much
Right.
related to public speaking,
Yes.
because
Yes.
if we start speaking from the chest, from the head,
Mhm.
our pitch is actually going higher. And when we speak from the stomach in a very relaxed way, in a very deep voice, it captivates people. So I think it's resonate with a hard kind of speaking approach, isn't it?
Yes. And that to me is preparation.
Mhm.
You have to adequately prepare to know your message, not word for word, but point for point, so that you can step in front of these people, whether it's on video, whether it's standing in front of a board of 12, whether it's standing in front of a room of hundreds. You know your outline. Now just get up, be yourself, and share it. And that will resonate with people. And the other thing too is that if you skip a point, if you don't say it the way you wanted to say it, nobody knows that but you.
Yeah. As long as you don't have it on the slides.
Well, true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But if you are, it is amazing to me. And I won't tell you the whole story, but so my first MC weekend was the Mary Graham Clone. My second MC weekend at Women of Faith, I was in St. Louis. There were 16,000 women in the room. And my first time up on the stage on Friday night, I fell. I tripped I tripped on the top step and I fell all the way down, hands and knees, and I hit the microphone on the platform. So it just was, if you missed the fall, you didn't miss the noise. But what I learned from that I share with other people is two things. One, what we imagine to be the worst. Like if you're afraid of public speaking, you think, oh my gosh, what if I forget what I'm going to say? What if I fall? All those worst case scenarios, I'm here to tell you it's survivable. So there's that. The second thing is we, every year there was an end of the year video that we would play at our own, like in our team party, and all the bloopers would make it. So you can bet your Bippy that one made it.
You make yourself memorable.
Yes, exactly.
Well done.
But what was so interesting to me was, so I just popped up and said something like, that's how we start the weekend with a bang, and just went on with it. And I know I was mortified. I was devastated. I wanted the stage to come apart, swallow me whole, and, go on without me. But on the video, I looked like I fell professionally. Like I looked like I wasn't phased. And so what I learned from that is by and large, the audience doesn't know you are nervous if you don't tell them. And P.S., don't ever tell them. The other thing was people were so nice to me that weekend. So many women came up and said nice things to me, encouraged me, because again, perfect is not relatable. But when you show yourself to be human, sometimes by messing up, it really resonates with people. And people they know you're a human being they want to connect with because you're not perfect. You're just
basically, yeah. Befriend your failures. I just had an interview on this subject, really befriend your failures.
Yeah.
So what are your best tips for public speaking? And I know you already shared tons of them, but I know you have even better tips.
Yes. Yes. Two additional things I would throw in. One is, again, confidence comes from a couple different things. One, adequately preparing.
Yeah.
If you want to just show up and wing it, that's a cheap approach. That's not worthy of you, and it's not worthy of your audience. If you see someone who really is a masterful communicator, who appears to have just shown up and delivered something really valuable with very little notice, what you are seeing is the result of years of practice, years of honing their message, years of honing their presence and their presentation skills. That's what's represented there. That is not 5 minutes notice and showing up and winging it. And confidence comes from knowing your message and from practicing it, rehearsing it, saying the words out loud. If you touched earlier on seeing yourself on video, if you want to really rehearse, set your phone up on the shelf and deliver your message with full movements, and then watch it back, because you will see things. Like if I don't manage myself, I would like to move the whole time I'm talking. I would like to just wander the stage and visit with the audience. But it feels good to me, it's distracting to them. So I have to make myself move here and plant myself and deliver a point, deliver the story, share the next part, then move to another place, plant my feet, and share the next. But if you don't watch yourself, you don't always see that. And so watching yourself, the other thing, you mentioned the questions, lighting and memorizing that people ask you. One of the things people always ask me about is how you get rid of the filler words, the ums and the and the, and a couple of things I've found to be really powerful in that. One is get comfortable with pausing. When you're standing on the stage, when you're in front of the microphone, a 1 second, 2 second pause sounds like forever. To your audience who's processing what you're sharing, it's a gift. They want the opportunity to process what you're sharing. If you just keep going with no gaps and no pauses, eventually you just lose them because our brains will just zone out after a while if we're not given a minute to keep up and to catch up. So pauses are your friend as a speaker. And when we're in conversation, we tend to use those ums and uhs because we're not finished speaking. And I want you to know it's still my turn. And so I just keep filling the gap until I think of my next thing. But as a speaker, good news, it's always your turn. So you don't have to fill the gaps.
That's a very different perspective. What you just say, it's obvious, but I never saw it from this angle. It's true.
Yeah.
You know what I teach in my course on this? Because people say and and I teach similar idea, except I say first use the fillers which are familiar for you. For example, despite, so add the actual word.
Yes.
And then as you know that you are using these words across, then read off these words and use pauses. This way you get in control with all the ums and hums and things like that. And the interesting part, which I noticed, let me know if it is same with you. In the moment we start talking about ums and stuff like this, we ourselves start using that, just like I did a minute ago.
Right.
Or less than a minute.
Right.
It's like the topic somehow hypnotizes our minds and we get back to hums and ums and all the things in our speech. Is that like that with you? Because I saw it in other speakers because they explain the subject and get back to it.
Yes, the suggestion I think does sort of plant that back with you. And it's an easy, and it's habitual. It's an easy habit to get into, but with some focus, it's a habit you can break.
Yeah.
And pauses. The other place that I have seen myself getting stuck is if I don't adequately think through the transitions ahead of time.
Sure.
You know your points, but if you've not thought how you're going to get from this point to this point, that's when I can start stuttering and stumbling and blumbling over words.
That exactly happened to you, just like that.
Yes, right. That's exactly right. But thinking through those transitions ahead of time and getting familiar with pauses, watching yourself on video and paying attention to what you need to work on, those to me are the three tactics that have helped me most in trying to eliminate those filler words.
One question which I have, and it's just come up like in the process. I remember in one of my interviews, I forgot the word, and the word was archetype. And the usual type of how I try to deal with the situation, I try to explain this idea through the whole description until maybe a person will come up with this word which I forgot. I can say I forgot this word.
To you.
Or it come to me, right? And It did come much after interview, to be honest.
Sure.
So
Of course.
sadly, it sounded really weird when I was explaining all this story, even a little bit rude. So because it shouldn't be like that. So how you deal with that if you forgotten the word, and it specifically was a term like an archetype, basically described all the idea. So it was a main word which was difficult to replace with anything else. So I was saying that it is specific characteristics, it's a specific type. I even forgot the word type, of course, because if I would say type, I would remember archetype.
Archetype.
So yeah, I messed up this long question really, really badly. So the question is, what do you do in such situation? How you overcome it?
You know, there are moments like that just are our humanity popping up, and we're not perfect. And so I would ask the audience for some, I would do what you did. I would explain it until it either comes to me or someone serves it up to me. The other thing that I think is important to share is that it is okay to have notes. It is not okay to read your notes. It is not okay to write out a speech word for word, stand behind a podium and read it to your audience. But the audience absolutely has grace for you to pause, give them a minute to catch up. It's a gift. Walk over and refer back to your notes and then take off on your next point. We feel so self-conscious about that sometimes, but it's 100% fine. Think of when you've watched a speaker. If they walked back to the podium or the stand and glanced at their notes or referred to a card in their hand or something, you don't think, oh my gosh, this person is so unprofessional. I can't believe I wasted my time. You would just never think that. But for some reason, we want to put that level of responsibility on ourselves. And it's not reasonable, and it's not helpful. And so sometimes when it is the 3 steps, the 5 terms, I will have those on a note somewhere, and I may never refer to it, but if it's there, if I need it. And sometimes I think when it's there, I'm less likely to need it. Where, just like you said, mentioning the filler words, we start using them. It's almost like the pressure of knowing you have no safety net makes me more likely to need it. But when I know I have a safety net, often I don't even look at it.
Right. So you were talking about the audience, and I know that one of your tips was related to the audience, and I want to go through this part. And I also will have an additional question about that. With public speaking, we often in the situation when we have cold audience, or people were prepared poorly with a previous speaker, or we just don't see them on video, which is the worst part, I guess, because we just don't know who we're talking to. Right. So, but let's keep the video part. It's a little bit different animal altogether. But with the audience, let's say we give the business presentation, not a big public, just like 20 people, something like that. How to prompt them to feel better about your presentation. You see that like they like that, they don't react, they like totally in their things. You know the situation. It's very, very common, in fact, for public speaking. Like modern people, like, the people who start in with public speaking, they're like, oh my God, they don't listen to me. It's like, yeah, that's common. So what to do about that? And tell your biggest tip about target audience, which you planned.
Yes. So I love to start with a story. And I love to start with the story that you love to tell, because it's something you know well. It is something you are genuinely excited about. And stories are scientifically proven to connect us. We are wired for story. It is in our DNA. Someone starts a story and we get a blast of cortisol that tells us to pay attention. And then we get rewarded by dopamine by staying with the unfolding of a story. And then when we engage with the emotion of a story, it raises our level of oxytocin, which is that pro-social hormone that connects us with one another. So to me, the fail safe is always, I start every message I ever deliver with a story. And usually if it can be a somewhat humorous, kind of self-deprecating story, it is just a soft landing to make a connection and to immediately show them this isn't just another board presentation with the stats and the figures from last quarter's sales numbers. It sets a different tone that connects you with the audience, whether it's 20 people or 20,000 people. In my experience, it is harder to speak to a room of 20 than it is to speak to a large audience, because they're right there in front of you. You can see them. And oftentimes, especially in business settings, which is where I speak mostly these days, there's not necessarily a ton of, it's just a different spirit than when you've gathered with tons of people at a conference or at an event or something that you're automatically excited about. It's a business meeting. It's a business presentation. And the audience is not always going to be as effusive and as demonstrative as you want them to be. The two things I would say, one is, as much as you can involve them, asking them questions, asking for examples. Have you ever seen this? Have you ever done this? What happened when? That draws them to you. The other thing is, sadly, again, you're the thermostat, not the thermometer. You're the leader in that moment, and it is your responsibility to convey the emotion you want to create in the room, to convey the energy you want to create in the room. It may be reflected back to you. It may not. It doesn't change your responsibility.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really important. So do you have any other tips for our audience?
The last piece that I would add is that your focus is the audience. When we think about ourselves, that's when fear shows up. That's when ego shows up. But you are there for one thing, and that is for your audience and whatever you have to offer them, the gift you have for them when you help them learn something, think differently, do differently, believe or feel something different. And so every question, how long does my message need to be? Should I include this story or that story? What do I need on my PowerPoints? It's always, what does your audience need? What does your audience need? It's not about you. It is not about your need for validation or for someone to enter into how you think or feel about something. It is, what does your audience need? They are your number one priority. And when you approach message development, presentation training through that lens, you may not hit the bullseye exactly right every time, but you're in the neighborhood, and you definitely can't hit it if you don't know what you're aiming for. So it's always about your audience.
Absolutely fantastic. I love all the tips. I think they're super, super practical. Thank you so much for them. And tell us more about how people can connect with you and how they can find you online. Give us all the links. I will give all the links in the description to this video, no question asked. So everybody need to follow you. But what is the main source where people can connect with you?
Absolutely. Eve, I want to thank you for having me here. And I want to thank you for serving your audience so fully, so well, with so much heart and so much generosity for all these years, and through all of these ups and downs and external factors that could derail anyone. And you just keep showing up, you keep picking yourself, and you're an example of showing up and picking yourself, whether you feel like it or not. And whether it's easy and some days it's hard, but you keep doing it. So I just, on behalf of myself and on behalf of your audience, I just thank you for that. I thank you for that. So my website is speakhercoach.com, her coach.com. If you go to speakhercoach.com/gift, I've got a couple of different freebies there that your audience can choose from a superpower 15-minute speaker training to a couple of different readable guides, one about showing up and being comfy on camera, as we all need to do these days. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm Lori D. Robertson on LinkedIn. And that's where I'm most engaged on social media. And that's where I connected with you.
Fantastic. And I'm so glad that Mel connected us. It's
Yes.
amazing. I'm so happy about that. Thank you so much for this interview. And for all our viewers, please check all the links in the description. Follow them, follow this channel, subscribe, and enjoy all of our guests and Lori specifically. Thank you so much.
Thank you.